We're in Portugal, in Peniche, and we're surfing, like learning how to surf, together with Rima, the founder of Network of Empathy and Coco. So my name is Marsel. I'm from Kazakhstan, and right now I'm doing my PhD in medical science in Sweden. It's a project connected to biomaterials and hearing aid implants. So I'm mostly studying the interactions between tissues, like skin, bone, and any kind of biomaterials. In my case, it's titanium implants. Additionally, I'm doing some activism, mostly in the sphere of language and queer. So I call myself a language queer activist in the context of Tatar, Kazakh, also I guess to some extent Russian. I started my journey when I started doing TikTok. Phrases in Kazakh that you should better avoid. Fun TikToks that I could myself relate to, and I found out that many people can actually relate to them, to the complexity of the identity. Like in my case, being a queer Muslim Russian-Tatar-Khakas from Kazakhstan, and yeah, there are so many people out there with these complex identities that are embracing every part of them. But also, when you go more into that, you realize how traumatized we are in those senses, and that maybe somehow I could help people with my activism to go over that trauma, to talk about this trauma, to get some space to reflect on it in a sense. I feel like once you come to terms with your own identity and you kind of understand the complexities of it, combination of different matters, you can also accept more easily the fact that others can be different than you are. And this way you, I don't know, building the circle of people around you that you actually appreciate for what they are. For me, it was always cool to find these different pieces in my own identity. Being half Russian, half Tatar, with a bit of Khakas blood, raised in Kazakhstan in a very Islamic space, I would say. It made me think a lot, like, what am I? And I actually take an effort when people ask me where you're from and what you are, to explain all the things, because for me it's fascinating. And I kind of came to some small conclusion that our identity is very fluid in many senses, and it like shapes within the space that you're placed in. For example, let's say I met a Kazakh guy in Paris, and then I bring up my Kazakh identity, my Kazakhstani identity, and then like I embrace it more, I bring it there because it makes me closer to this person. He can relate to me more, and yeah, and that's really nice. I always try to find the way how to open people up, how to give them more space to talk about it, and it's very difficult because in the beginning of my journey I would say I would be too direct. I would just say, oh, but you're Tatar, speak about it, like let me know, it's so cool, you're Tatar. But now I understand that sometimes it's a very sensitive topic for people and they really try to hide it. When I was in Tatarstan, and people are asking me why am I speaking Tatar and learning Tatar while like being from Kazakhstan, living in Europe, etc. Because then they would also try to say, I don't need Tatar. I'm Tatar from Tatarstan, I don't need Tatar. Why do you need it? And I just say, I like it, it's beautiful. It's like beautiful language, I like learning it. I feel connection. And it's all, and people like, they expect from me some more argumentation, but I just say, no, very beautiful language, I like it. And that kills the conversation. It's like no, like nothing else like to bring up, because they expect me to go like very hard, say like how important Tatar should be, everyone should speak it, but no, I don't say it. Yeah. And about how I'm taking sometimes opposite identities, I think it comes from my queer background, and that I always somehow end up being a minority everywhere. So like when I was raised, I was a ethnic minority in my hometown and also a sexual minority, right? Activism started not a long time ago, and it started with my journey of learning Tatar as my heritage language, so I didn't speak it before. My dad is Tatar, he never really spoke it to us, but it was a little bit around, so I heard it, so I had some basic knowledge and I started to learn about it. And with Tatar there is such a thing that when you are learning it, it's kind of impossible to not learn about the language policies of Russia and how imperial they are, how they're trying to kill the languages, all the languages in Russia except for Russian. And you kind of see it as a ladder of different laws that were made by Putin to kill the language, kill the identity itself. And that was a little motivation for me in the sense to start Tatar activism, and that's when I really found my way into Tatar community myself, because before my Tatar community would be just funerals and Sabantuis, the holidays of Tatars that we would celebrate. And like usually Tatars have a big community feeling, but my Tatar family is super small. But after, when I really got interested in it and I learned Tatar myself and I started my activism within Tatar space, I started to find Tatars everywhere. I think it's because it's the most marginalized identity and the most endangered one. Because with Russian, like, what could be endangered there? With Khakas, I'm too disconnected. My Khakas grandfather was killed by Stalin, like during Stalin repression times. I also do a lot, I think, in Kazakh space because I feel very much related to Kazakhstan, and for me it's very important to do things in Kazakh, not in Russian. And it makes me very upset when I see, for example, some queer organizations in Kazakhstan that do things just in Russian, and I know that they have money to invest a little bit and do a Kazakh translation, but they just don't. And I was actually thinking a lot about my Russianness, what makes me Russian. It's a super interesting topic, and I'm trying to write an essay, like reflection essay, what has been Russian for me. And I realized that for me being Russian is a lot about reading Russian literature because at school, yeah, right, in Kazakhstan we have a lesson of Russian literature. And you go all the way from Slova o Polku Igorevе to Pushkin to Dostoevsky to Chekhov to Nabokov, and it's really Russian literature. But when I was reflecting on it, I realized this is so far away from my real social experience. I was living in Kintau, like surrounded by mountains, mostly Kazakh Uzbek population, with the biggest Sufi mausoleum of Hoja Ahmed Yasawi. Why my moral, ethical base should be on Russian literature? And it's like, I remember myself reading all those Russian novels, thinking about Russian soul, Russian forests. It's like this nihilism, like all this Russian imperial history, which is like nothing relevant to my own experience. Yeah. But it's such a big moral, ethical base for your conscious foundation, like the way you think, the way you build your thinking. And I realized, yeah, this way I'm Russian a lot. I also had the choice to choose a Russian passport when I was 15 because my mom is a citizen of Russia, and my parents, they asked me, like, do you want to be a citizen of Russia or Kazakhstan? I took some time and I thought about it, and I consciously chose to be a citizen of Kazakhstan because I was like, Russia, what connects me to Russia? Nothing. I even called my mom to talk about it. Like, I asked her, what is being Russian for you? And she told me that for her, in the first place, Russian is about the language. So very often she thinks of people as Russian just because they speak Russian. But then I was like, do you speak any other languages? And she doesn't really speak fluently any other language. So she just talks to people who can speak Russian to her. So is everyone who speaks Russian Russian? Very questionable thing, no? We're so multilingual. Now it became mainstream to talk about decolonization, Russian imperialism, just because the war started in Ukraine. And it became too obvious. But for us, it was always a topic of discussion. It's not like it popped up because the war started. No, it was always there. It's just like now bigger media started to pay more attention about to these things. In Kazakhstan, yes, definitely. In Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, like in all over Central Asia, because we have space for it. Especially in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, I would say. We have space to reflect on our traumas of Ashurshuluk, like the big famine in Kazakhstan. In case with Russia, no. I think people are just in a very bad state, and it's not just different ethnic groups of Russia, but also Russians themselves. They don't have time and place to process their trauma because they also were under the Tsarist rule, the Soviet rule, even being on this like higher up on the social ladder as Russians and Russian-speaking people, they still went through a lot, and they have this generational trauma. But how I see it is that modern Russia cannot continue its existence in the state that it is right now, and it's just unavoidable that something should happen for it to split, and then maybe to become a better place in some senses, but it needs to go through that. And in this way, I also use my privilege as a person from Kazakhstan living in Sweden, who can I can talk myself about independence of Tatarstan, like think about it, write about it, and not get sent to the jail, and not like my relatives want to be affected by that in any way, because like if it's a person from Russia, a public figure who will talk about this kind of things, then like this person of course is going to be anxious about his or her parents or anybody who is left in Russia. And yeah, but that's why am I paying so much attention to other ethnic groups of Russia? Because they're under double oppression. Helping them for me is a priority in a sense. Like we talk a lot about how we hate Russia, Putin, etc., but we still help so much. We like at least me or my friends, we help to everybody. And it's like also Ukrainians, they help a lot to Russians, like that they know, because it's not about as much people, it's more about the, I don't know, this global ideology and state thing. And I just wish that more people would appreciate it and try to understand why in Georgia it's written Russians go home. And not just take it personally and think that they're so offended by it.
That's nice. Okay. Thank you.
Again, we end up speaking about Russia.